Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The contrast between El Paso, Texas and Juarez, Mexico has always been one of the great advertisements for America and for the American way. The cities have a lot in common. They're literally right next to each other. They're separated by one of the narrowest stretches of the Rio Grande River by feet. From downtown El Paso, you can see downtown Juarez. And the populations are not that different. Most people in El Paso have relatives in Mexico. The difference is one city is American and one is not. El Paso has always been tranquil and orderly, a really nice town. With good schools and friendly people, you would move there. Juarez is terrifying, chaotic, impoverished, dangerous. In 2010, Juarez recorded more than 3,000. In El Paso, just yards away, there were 5. So on one side of the river, you had a high-functioning civilization, ours, and on the other side, you had the third world. And the success of El Paso said everything about the superiority of the American system and American culture. But 2 years ago, Joe Biden set out to change that. It was an offense against equity. They were too different. But instead of fixing Juarez, he decided to El Paso and make it much more like Juarez. To do that, the administration opened America's southern border to the world. No place in our country was hit harder by that decision than El Paso, Texas. In the last year, illegal immigration into El Paso has risen by over 280%. Hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals streaming in, jobless, penniless, anonymous. What happened next? You know what happened next. The most predictable disaster in the world. Crime skyrocketed. Social cohesion collapsed. Test scores in local schools plummeted, and the city began to fall apart. People who grew up in El Paso started to leave in large numbers. This is what it looks like now.
It's a chilly December night in El Paso, Texas, and these migrants are homeless, camping on the streets, preparing for a night of bitter cold after they were released from Border Patrol custody. The migrant surge also overwhelming local shelters as this unprecedented crisis seems headed for a potential breaking point, with Title 42 set to drop next week. And there is no reprieve coming, as new Fox News video shows over 1,000 migrants camped at the border wall in El Paso last night, waiting to be let in for processing after they crossed the Rio Grande illegally. CBP sources tell Fox News the El Paso sector has already seen over 139,000 migrant encounters since October 1st. That's enough to fill up LA's SoFi Stadium twice, and it reflects a 255% increase over the same time last year.
Imagine if that was your city, where you work and raised your family, the city that you built. And then one day some guy gets elected and decides, and the media ignore it, no one even covers it. Most Americans have no idea your city has been. And it's not just downtown and the shelters, it's the airport. The window into El Paso. In case you haven't flown there recently, here's what it looks like. People seem to be camping on the floor of the place. Looks like the train station in post-partition Calcutta. But at least they had a war to blame it on. There's no war in Texas except the war the White House declared on its own country. This footage comes from Katie Davis-Court of Rebel News, whom we'll talk to in a moment.
I just landed in El Paso, Texas, and here at the El Paso airport is an influx of illegal immigrants sleeping on the airport floors. Take a look at what's happening here in the airport. ¿Dónde son? Peru? Peru. Everyone? ¿Dónde son? ¿Dónde son? Dominican? Dominicana? ¿Dónde son? Colombia.
That's the airport. They're not waiting for flights, they're living there. And they're not from Mexico or even El Salvador and Guatemala. They're from, as you just heard, Colombia, Peru, the Dominican Republic, an island. These are countries thousands of miles away, to which we owe nothing. There's no reason for this. There are 7 million American men of working age who are not working. They're on the internet all day. They have nothing to do. And yet we're doing this. The mayor of El Paso, Oscar Leeser, has just declared a state of emergency, and you can see why.
We felt there was proper time today to call a state of emergency. And the reason why we're doing it is because I said from the beginning that I would call it when I felt that either our asylum seekers or our community was not safe. And I really believe that today our asylum seekers are not safe, as we have hundreds and hundreds on the streets.
El Paso wasn't like this just a few years ago.